Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I moved to this gated community in Central Florida about 5 years ago after my divorce. The community has about 40 homes, and we all share access to a boat ramp and dock on the lake. The lake itself isn't owned by our homeowners association, but our little section with the ramp is exclusively for residents. Other houses around the lake have their own private access points, so there's never been any confusion about who can use what. I joined the Homeowners Association board 2 years ago, mostly because I wanted to help maintain our lake access. It's one of the main selling points of living here, and I figured volunteering a few hours a month was worth protecting that amenity. About 4 years ago, I showed up on one morning ready to take my boat out for some early morning fishing. I pulled my truck and trailer down to the ramp only to find a thick chain stretched across the entire width of the boat launch. Someone had installed metal posts on both sides and padlocked the chain between them. I called our homeowners association president immediately. I told him someone had blocked off our boat ramp completely. He asked what I meant by blocked it off. I explained there was a chain across the whole thing with a padlock and nobody could launch anything. He said that was ridiculous and that we hadn't authorized anything like that. He told me he'd be right over. Within an hour, 3 board members showed up with bolt cutters. We had no idea which resident decided to take it upon themselves to lock down community property, but we weren't having it. The chain and posts disappeared that same day. We sent a community-wide email reminding everyone that the boat ramp belongs to all residents and nobody has the authority to restrict access without board approval. Last year, things escalated with a different resident. This guy had a massive pickup truck and a decent-sized fishing boat. Every weekend, he'd launch his boat and then drive his truck right down onto the grass next to the dock to park. The first few times, I figured maybe he didn't know better. Our community rules clearly state no parking on grass areas because it kills the lawn and creates muddy ruts when it rains. There's a small paved parking area about 50 yards up from the ramp specifically for this purpose. I approached him one Saturday while he was loading gear into his boat. I let him know there was actually a parking lot up the hill for when he was out on the water. He said this spot was more convenient. I told him I understood that, but parking on the grass wasn't allowed because it was in the community guidelines. He said nobody else was using the grass. That was pretty much the end of our conversation. He kept parking on the grass every single weekend. Other residents started complaining to the homeowners association. The grass was getting torn up, and when it rained, his truck left deep ruts that stayed muddy for days. Our president sent him a written warning. Then another one. Nothing changed. Finally, the board decided to install 2 large no parking signs right in the grass area where he always parked. We spaced them specifically, so there wouldn't be room for a vehicle between them. Instead of using the designated parking area like any reasonable person would, this guy decided to get creative. He started parking his truck right on the boat ramp itself, blocking the entire launch. The first time he did this, another resident called me because they couldn't launch their boat. They told me someone parked their truck right on the ramp and they couldn't get their boat in the water. I said I was serious and told them I'd come take a look. Sure enough, his massive pickup was sitting right in the middle of the concrete ramp, not slightly to one side where maybe another boat could squeeze by, dead center, taking up the entire width. I left a note on his windshield explaining that parking on the ramp blocks access for everyone else and asking him to use the designated parking area. The next weekend, same thing. Truck parked right on the ramp. I knocked on his door this time. I told him we needed to talk about where he was parking his truck. He asked where he was supposed to park. I told him in the parking area, the same place everyone else parks. He said that was too far from his boat. I explained it was 50 yards and everyone else managed just fine. He said he wasn't hurting anything. I told him he was blocking the boat ramp and other people couldn't launch their boats when his truck was sitting there. He said they could wait until he got back. I explained that wasn't how shared community amenities work. He said he paid homeowners association fees just like everyone else. The conversation went nowhere. He genuinely seemed to believe that paying fees gave him the right to monopolize the boat ramp. 2 weeks later, I got a call on Sunday morning from an elderly resident who wanted to take his grandkids fishing. He told me that truck was blocking the ramp again, and he had promised his grandchildren they'd go fishing today. I asked how long it had been there. He said since yesterday, and that the boat wasn't even at the dock anymore. I drove down to check. Sure enough, the truck had been sitting on the ramp overnight. The boat was gone, meaning this guy had taken his boat out, left his truck blocking everyone else, and went home. That was it. I called our homeowners association president. I told him we needed to tow the truck because the owner had been warned multiple times, and now he was just leaving it there overnight. The president asked if I was sure we had the authority to do that. I told him it was our private property, he was blocking access, and we absolutely had the authority. The president called our towing company. They said they'd send someone out within the hour. I decided to stick around and watch the tow truck arrive. I wanted to make sure there were no issues with the removal. The tow truck driver was a professional guy who'd handled homeowners association calls before. He positioned his truck at the top of the ramp and started setting up to winch the pickup truck up. About halfway through the process, I heard the truck owner come running down from his house. He yelled at the tow truck driver, asking what he was doing to his truck. The tow driver explained he was removing it because he got a call from the homeowners association about unauthorized parking. The truck owner shouted that the driver couldn't tow his truck because he lived here. I reminded him that he was warned multiple times about blocking the boat ramp. He yelled that this was theft. The tow truck driver told him he needed to step back while he finished the job. The truck owner was getting increasingly agitated, gesturing wildly and yelling about his rights. The tow truck driver remained calm and continued working. Then something beautiful happened. Either the truck owner bumped the parking brake release in his fury, or the tow truck operator accidentally shifted something, but suddenly the pickup truck started rolling backward down the ramp. All three of us watched in slow motion as this massive truck rolled straight into the lake. The water came up past the doors before it finally stopped. The truck owner just stood there with his mouth open. The tow truck driver scratched his head and said that was a first. The truck owner yelled about his truck being in the lake. I told him it looked like he found a new parking spot. The tow truck driver ended up having to call in additional equipment to extract the waterlogged pickup from the lake. The whole process took about 4 hours and cost significantly more than a standard tow would have. I never saw that truck parked on the boat ramp again. The owner had to deal with insurance claims, water damage, and probably some very awkward phone calls explaining how his vehicle ended up submerged in a lake. The boat ramp has been clear ever since. I have a muscle condition that affects my ankles and balance. Most people can't tell just by looking at me, which makes things complicated. It's good because I don't get stared at, but bad because people think I'm making excuses when I can't do certain things. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years now, and his family has been welcoming. His sister has a 5-year-old daughter who loves him, and she's grown to like me too. When his sister asked if we could babysit for the weekend while she went on a work trip, we said yes. The little girl had been talking about ice skating for weeks. She saw it on some Disney movie and became obsessed with gliding around on the ice like a princess. When she asked if we could take her skating during our babysitting weekend, my boyfriend said yes without thinking it through. Later that evening, when we were planning the weekend activities, I had to bring up my concerns. I told him I could take her to the rink and watch, but I wouldn't be able to skate with her. When he asked why and mentioned that I love trying new things, I explained that my ankles can't handle it. With my condition, I could easily fall and get seriously hurt, or worse, I could fall and hurt her if she's near me. He understood and suggested he could do all the skating while I watched from the heated area inside the rink. When Saturday came around, the little girl was excited. She had picked out her warmest clothes and kept asking if it was time to go yet. When we were getting ready to leave, she noticed I didn't have any ice skates and asked if I had forgotten them. I told her I wasn't going to skate that day, but that I would watch her and her uncle have fun. She looked disappointed and asked why I didn't want to skate with her. I knew I had to explain it in a way she could understand without scaring her. I told her I'd love to skate with her, but the muscles in my ankles don't work the way they're supposed to, and if I tried to skate, I might fall and get hurt. She said it was like how her friend at school can't run fast because of her leg. I agreed and said it was exactly like that, but that I'd still be there cheering her on and taking pictures. She seemed satisfied with this explanation and went back to talking about all the moves she was going to try. We had a wonderful time at the rink. She held on to her uncle's hands while they slowly made their way around the ice, and I took dozens of photos and videos. She waved at me every time they passed by the area where I was sitting, and I cheered loudly for every small accomplishment. When we got home that evening, she talked nonstop about her ice skating adventure. She called her mom to tell her all about it, mentioning how much fun she had and how I had been the best cheerleader ever. Everything seemed fine until Monday morning when my boyfriend's sister called him. I could hear her voice through the phone and she did not sound happy. She told him she needed to talk to me. My boyfriend handed me the phone with a confused look. His sister told me she had heard I told her daughter about my medical condition. When I explained that her daughter had asked why I wasn't skating, so I explained it simply, she said that was inappropriate. She said that a child that young doesn't need to be concerning themselves with such scary things. I tried to explain that I didn't think it was scary and that I had just told her my ankle muscles don't work properly. But she argued that I had made her daughter worry about me getting hurt and that she had spent Sunday asking questions about disabilities and whether people she knows might be sick. I pointed out that her daughter was just curious and that kids ask questions when they learn new things. But she said that was exactly the problem, that I had put adult concerns into a child's head. She demanded that next time I needed to keep my personal medical issues to myself and find another excuse. I was stunned. I had been honest with her daughter in the most age-appropriate way I could think of, and now I was being told I should have lied instead. When I asked if she'd prefer I make up a story rather than give her a simple, truthful explanation, she said yes, exactly. She told me to say I don't feel like skating or that I forgot my skates, anything but discussing my disability. I reminded her that her daughter has a friend at school with a leg condition, so she already knows that some people have bodies that work differently. But she said that was different, and that it wasn't her responsibility to explain. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with her saying that I had traumatized her daughter by mentioning my condition. According to her, I should have pretended to have a headache or said I was afraid of falling. After we hung up, my boyfriend was angry on my behalf. He told me she was being ridiculous and that I had handled it perfectly. The real surprise came on Wednesday when the little girl called us herself. She told me she had talked to her teacher about ice skating and about how my ankles work differently. When I asked what her teacher said, she explained that her teacher said it was thoughtful of me to explain it to her and that it's good to understand that everyone's body is different. She also mentioned that her teacher said some of her classmates have parents with disabilities too. I agreed with her teacher and she continued by telling me that her teacher also said that people who explain things honestly are showing respect and that lying to kids about important things isn't very nice. It turned out that during show and tell, she had mentioned our ice skating trip and naturally included the part about my ankle condition in her story. Her teacher, who had experience with disability awareness, had used it as a teaching moment for the whole class about differences and inclusion. When the teacher mentioned this to the little girl's mother during pickup, she praised her for raising such an understanding and empathetic child. The teacher also mentioned how refreshing it was that the adults in her life were teaching her to be accepting of people with disabilities rather than treating it as something shameful to hide. My boyfriend's sister called that evening, much quieter than before. She admitted that the teacher said I had handled the situation well. When I told her I was glad the teacher thought so, she quietly said that maybe she had overreacted. It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was acknowledgement. More importantly, her daughter had learned something valuable about accepting differences, and I hadn't been forced to lie about who I am. The following weekend, when the little girl asked if we could go bowling next time, she immediately added that she understood if the way my ankles work meant I couldn't bowl either, and that she'd be happy to cheer me on instead if I wanted to try. It all started when Karen moved in next door. From day one, she made it clear she wasn't happy about living next to a family with young children. She would glare at us over the fence whenever we were outside, and she complained to anyone who would listen about the constant noise coming from our yard. Mind you, we're talking about normal kid activities during reasonable hours. The children were never outside past 7 p.m., and they weren't doing anything more disruptive than playing catch or riding their bikes in circles. The complaint started small. Karen would knock on our door and ask us to keep the noise down because she was trying to read or take a nap. I tried to be understanding at first, explaining that kids need outdoor time and we were already limiting their play to daylight hours. She wasn't satisfied with that response. Then she started calling the Homeowners Association. I received 3 letters in 1 month about noise violations and disturbing the peace. Each time I had to explain to the association president that children playing in their own backyard during the day wasn't a violation of any rules. The association sided with us, which only made Karen angrier. Things escalated when she installed security cameras pointed directly at our yard. Not just 1 or 2 cameras, but 5 different angles, covering every inch of our property that was visible from her side. When I politely asked her about it, she said she needed to document the disturbances for legal purposes. My wife suggested we try to smooth things over by inviting Karen to our annual barbecue. Maybe if she got to know us better, she'd realize we were reasonable people just trying to raise our kids in a safe environment. That backfired spectacularly. Karen showed up for exactly 10 minutes, spent the entire time complaining about how loud everything was, and left after telling the children they were undisciplined brats. The situation reached a breaking point last month. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and the twins were outside playing with their new frisbee. They were laughing and calling out to each other, but nothing excessive or inappropriate. I was grilling burgers on the patio while my wife worked in her garden. Around 2 p.m., I noticed Karen standing at her back door, talking on her phone and gesturing angrily toward our yard. I figured she was probably calling the Homeowners Association again, so I didn't think much of it. The kids continued playing, completely unaware of the drama brewing next door. About an hour later, my daughter came running toward the house, screaming at the top of her lungs. Behind her was the largest lizard I had ever seen in person. This thing was easily 4 feet long with a thick tail and a forked tongue flicking in and out of its mouth. My son was frozen in terror about 20 feet away, afraid to move. I immediately recognized it as a Komodo dragon. Having watched enough nature documentaries, I knew these animals were extremely dangerous and could kill a person with their bite. My heart was pounding when I quickly ushered both children into the house and called animal control. Karen appeared at the fence line, acting completely innocent and asking what the problem was. I told her there was a Komodo dragon in my yard and my kids were almost attacked. I asked if she had seen where it came from. She acted shocked and told me how terrible that was, claiming it must have just wandered in from somewhere. Her tone was so fake that I immediately knew she was involved somehow. While we waited for animal control to arrive, I watched from my kitchen window when the massive reptile wandered around our backyard, occasionally stopping to flick its tongue at the air. The animal control officers arrived within 30 minutes. 2 of them approached the Komodo dragon with specialized equipment, while a third officer interviewed me about the situation. I explained that we had never seen this animal before and that it definitely wasn't native to our area. The officer told me that these animals don't just appear randomly and someone had to bring this here deliberately. He asked if I had any idea who might have done something like this. I looked toward Karen's house and saw her watching the whole scene from her window. I told him I had my suspicions but couldn't prove anything. The officers managed to safely capture the Komodo dragon using a large net and specialized poles. When they were loading it into their vehicle, one of them mentioned they would need to investigate how an exotic animal ended up in a residential neighborhood. That's when things got really interesting. Karen came storming out of her house, walking directly toward the animal control truck. She started yelling that it was her emotional support animal and they couldn't just take him. The officer explained that Komodo dragons are not legal emotional support animals and are extremely dangerous, requiring special permits to own. Karen told him she didn't care about the stupid rules and demanded they give her back her dragon right now. She actually tried to open the back of the animal control vehicle. When the officer stepped in to stop her, Karen shoved him backward and started screaming about her rights being violated. She threatened to call the police and accuse them of theft. The officer warned her that she had just admitted to releasing a dangerous animal into someone else's property and assaulted a government official. He told her she needed to step back immediately, but Karen wasn't backing down. She kept trying to get to the vehicle, pushing past the officers and shouting threats about lawsuits and government overreach. Finally, one of the officers had enough and called for backup. When the police arrived, they found Karen still trying to physically prevent the animal control truck from leaving. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about how we were all conspiring against her and how the Komodo dragon was just trying to teach those brats some respect. That's when she fully confessed to everything. Apparently, she had been planning this for weeks. She purchased the Komodo dragon from some illegal exotic animal dealer and kept it in her basement until she decided to use it to scare my children away from playing outside. She ranted that those kids needed to learn that their actions have results, and maybe next time they would think twice before making so much noise. The police officers looked at each other in shock. One of them asked her to repeat what she had just told them, which she did even more angrily than before. Karen was arrested on the spot for endangering children, owning illegal exotic animals, assault on a government official, and about 6 other charges I couldn't keep track of. When they put her in handcuffs, she kept screaming that we were the real criminals for forcing her to take such drastic action. The animal control officers confirmed that the Komodo dragon would be relocated to a proper facility where it could be cared for safely. They also mentioned that Karen would face significant fines and possible jail time for her actions. Later that evening, my wife and I sat on our back patio while the kids played inside. The yard felt safe again, but we were both still processing what had happened. My wife told me she couldn't believe someone would actually put our children in danger over noise complaints. I agreed and told her at least we didn't have to worry about her anymore. 2 weeks later, we found out that Karen had been sentenced to 6 months in jail and ordered to pay thousands of dollars in fines. She also received a restraining order preventing her from coming within 500 feet of our property. I lost my job 2 months ago when the company I worked at for 5 years decided to downsize. With 2 young kids at home and my spouse working part-time, money has been tight. I've been trying to find ways to save on everything, especially toys and outdoor equipment for the kids. That's how I discovered this local online auction site last week. At first, I was just browsing, looking at furniture and household items we might need, but something about the bidding process got me hooked. There's this rush when you place a bid and wait to see if someone outbids you. It became my new entertainment during the long days of job hunting. A few days ago, I was scrolling through the kids section when I spotted something perfect. A $600 Jeep Wrangler wagon. Not a real car, obviously, but one of those fancy kids' wagons you can pull or push around. My kids had been begging for something like this for months, especially since our neighbor got one for their kids. The retail price was way out of our budget, but the auction was starting at just $5. I placed my bid right away and settled in to watch. These auctions run for several days, so I knew I had time. But within minutes of my bid, someone else had outbid me by 75 cents. I bid again, and like clockwork, the same user bumped it up another 75 cents. This pattern continued for hours. Every single time I placed a bid, this person would counter with exactly 75 cents more. Not a dollar, not 50 cents, but precisely 75 cents every time. It was starting to feel personal. By the end of the first day, we were up to around $90. I decided to step back and see what would happen. Maybe this other bidder would get tired of the game and move on to something else. I checked back the next morning, and sure enough, they were still sitting at the top with their $90.75 bid. Nobody else had jumped in overnight. It was just me and this mystery person locked in this weird bidding war over a kid's wagon. I really didn't want to keep going higher, but my kids' disappointed faces kept flashing in my mind. They'd been so good about understanding why we couldn't buy them new toys lately. This felt like a chance to get them something special without breaking the bank, so I jumped to $150, thinking maybe a bigger leap would discourage my competition. Within seconds, there it was again, $150.75. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a person manually bidding against me. This had to be some kind of automated system. A bot that was programmed to outbid everyone by exactly 75 cents, probably with a maximum limit set by the real bidder. I started testing my theory. I placed a bid in time how long it took for the counter bid. Every single time it was less than 10 seconds. No human could be that consistent, especially not over multiple days. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Here I was, an unemployed father trying to get something nice for his kids, competing against some computer program run by someone who probably had money to burn. They'd set up this bot to outbid everyone without even having to pay attention to the auction. When the final day approached, I made a decision. If this person wanted to use a bot to cheat their way to winning, I was going to make them pay for it. I started bidding more aggressively. $200, $250, $300. Each time the bot responded with its 75-cent increment. I could almost picture the smug person who'd set this up, thinking they were so clever. With about an hour left in the auction, we'd reached $500. Way more than I could afford, but I was committed now. This wasn't about the wagon anymore. This was about principle. During the final 5 minutes, I pushed it even harder. I got my bid up to $770, and sure enough, the bot came back with $770.75. When the auction ended, the bot had won at $770.75. But here's the thing about this auction site that I'd learned from reading the fine print. All payments are automatic and final. Plus, there's a 20% fee on top of the winning bid that includes state tax. So this person who thought they were being so smart with their bot just got stuck paying over $900 for a kid's wagon that retails for $600. And since the payment is automatic, they can't back out even if they realize what happened. I never got the wagon for my kids, but honestly, I felt better than if I had won it. Knowing that some entitled person who thought they could game the system just got stuck with a massive bill made the whole thing worth it. I checked the auction site the next day. There was a message from the winner complaining about a system error with their bidding and asking to cancel the purchase. The auction house had responded below it, explaining that all sales are final and the payment had already been processed. I moved into this secure apartment building about 6 months ago after finally saving enough money from my part-time job at a local bookstore and some help from my parents. The building had strict security protocols that all residents had to follow. We each got a key fob that we needed to enter the building, and under no circumstances were we allowed to let anyone else in, even other tenants. The management made this crystal clear during orientation. They explained that breaking this rule could result in immediate lease termination, and honestly, that terrified me since I was barely making rent as it was. The building had front desk staff during business hours and security in the evenings, but there were always a few hours during shift changes when nobody was stationed at the front desk. That's when problems usually happened. There was this one guy in the building who seemed to constantly forget his fob. I'd seen him multiple times getting let in by staff or security, always with some excuse about forgetting it upstairs or leaving it in his other jacket. He looked young, probably somewhere between 18 and 20, and he had this entitled attitude that rubbed me the wrong way. When I saw him getting buzzed in by staff, he never seemed embarrassed or apologetic about the inconvenience he was causing. Last Tuesday was one of those quiet afternoon periods when no staff was at the front desk. I was heading out to grab a drink from the gas station down the street when I noticed him standing outside the building, clearly locked out again. I walked past him without making eye contact and went about my business. The gas station was only a 5-minute walk, so I grabbed my drink and started heading back. About halfway there, I realized someone was walking behind me. When I looked back, it was the same guy from the building. He was definitely following me, probably hoping I'd let him in when we got back. Sure enough, when we reached the building entrance, he approached me. He asked if I had a cigarette he could borrow. I told him I didn't smoke. I pulled out my fob to unlock the door, and immediately he moved closer, clearly planning to slip in behind me. The moment I realized what he was trying to do, I quickly stepped inside and pulled the door shut behind me before he could follow. He started shouting at me through the glass, demanding that I let him in because he lived there too. I turned around and looked at him through the door and told him that if he lived there, he should have his fob. He claimed he had forgotten it upstairs and begged me to let him in for just a second. I explained that I couldn't do that because it was against the building rules. He got angry and said it was ridiculous since he literally lived there, and I had seen him before. I suggested he wait for staff to come back or call the emergency line. I walked away from the door, leaving him standing outside. I could hear him banging on the glass and shouting something, but I didn't look back. The whole situation made me uncomfortable, but I knew I had done the right thing. The building management had been very clear about the no exceptions policy. The next morning, I was heading out for work when I saw him in the lobby talking to the front desk staff. His voice was raised and he was moving his hands wildly. He was complaining loudly about how I had seen him trying to get in and just slammed the door in his face. He insisted that he lived there and that my behavior was completely unacceptable. The staff member patiently explained that residents were not permitted to let anyone into the building, even other residents, and that this policy existed for everyone's safety and security. He argued that he had forgotten his fob and that I could see he was a resident. The staff member acknowledged that it was frustrating but emphasized that the policy existed for a reason and recommended that he keep his fob with his keys or in a consistent pocket. He declared the whole situation insane and said I was being completely unreasonable. I was walking past them toward the exit when he noticed me. He pointed at me and told the staff member that there I was, demanding that I explain how I had refused to help him. I stopped and looked directly at him, then at the staff member. I said that they had warned him to remember his fob. I smiled and continued walking toward the door. Behind me, I could hear him getting even more upset, asking if I was serious and whether I was just going to walk away like that. The staff member told him to please lower his voice and confirmed that the resident had followed building policy correctly. I pushed through the exit door and headed to work, feeling pretty satisfied with how I'd handled the situation. Later that afternoon, I went down to the lobby to use the Wi-Fi and make some tea at the resident coffee station. The same staff member from the morning was still at the desk. They approached me and said they wanted me to know that I had done the right thing yesterday. They mentioned that they had spoken to that resident multiple times about remembering his fob. I thanked them and admitted I was worried I might have been too harsh. They assured me that I wasn't harsh at all and wanted me to know that if he tried this again, or if I ever felt threatened by any resident, I was authorized to call their security line immediately. They emphasized that they took these policy violations seriously. I asked if this had been an ongoing issue with him. The staff member said that I wasn't the first resident he had approached about this, and that they had documented several incidents. A few hours later, I was back in the lobby making another cup of tea when I overheard two other staff members talking. The first one asked if the second had heard about the incident yesterday with a resident who forgot his fob again. The second staff member asked if it was the same guy from last month. The first one confirmed it was and explained that he had actually followed another resident to try to get in and then complained when she wouldn't let him in. The second staff member said that was concerning behavior and that following someone suggested this was more than just forgetfulness. The first staff member agreed and said they were keeping an eye on it. They mentioned that if it escalated, they might need to have a formal meeting with him about lease compliance. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.